Hello, good morning and welcome. It is Friday, May the 2nd, and this is an election special edition of Politics at Sam and Anne's. My name is Sam Coates from Sky News.
And I'm Anne McElvoy from Politico, and together after a very long night, we're bringing you a morning verdict on the local election results in 20 minutes. What a night it's been. Drama for all parties in 6 mayoralties and 24 council races across the country. Sam, the big question, is it a night that you think marks a fundamental reshaping of British politics?
Yes. And the reason I think that is because what Reform UK have done is they have proved they can make inroads into Labour areas, having already shown that they could make inroads into Tory areas and in numbers of voters that we did not know that they were able to deliver. This is a moment that Downing Street and CCHQ will both look to as a turning point where they have to deal much more seriously and confront much more actively the threat posed by Nigel Farage's party.
So I'm going to put you on the spot. You've been up all night doing all of this. A lot of us have watched you on screen, but give us your whirlwind tour now of the results that really matter. Separate the signal from all of that noise overnight.
There is one result that matters more than anything else, and that is the result in the by-election, because we've got mayoral results, we've got council results, not many of them have come in yet, but the by-election matters. It matters more than any other. It always does on election night, because that is the verdict of people electing to Westminster. And there the result is sensational. In the last hour, Reform UK have taken the 49th safest Labour seat in the country in the form of Runcorn and Helsby. They got 38.7% of the vote, coming from almost nowhere in that seat to overtake Labour, but they did so by just 6 votes. It's the most aggressive of campaigns that's been fought, and Reform UK have come out on top. There's one question that's going to be asked over and over in Downing Street again, which was if Keir Starmer had bothered to go, would that result have been different? But I think that not only has the reform proved itself, but there's now a question about how the main parties adjust to that reality. Then you've got the mayoralties. The second most important result of the night is that Reform UK not only has another MP, but it's also in power. That individual is Andrea Jenkins. We are now past the point where anyone else can win. She is on course to be the mayor of Lincolnshire, and she will now run that combined authority. She will have power, make decisions about investment and transport in that area. Another first for Reform UK. And then the final thing we're seeing is the split across the political system where votes are going. Labour's vote challenged not only from Reform UK, but even losing some by-election seats to the Green Party. So if Number 10 thinks the answer to this sensational set of results is to move more onto Reform UK's territory, there is also a warning, whether you're looking at the result at the West of England mayor in Bristol or other places in London, that if they do that, there is a threat of voters going away from Labour and to the Green Party. It's a fragile coalition, one that there are no easy answers. And I think today's results are going to be talked about for years to come.
I appointed myself the Northeast correspondent on this podcast overnight, Sam. And interesting there, I think, is particularly that North Tyneside race. Nigel Farage has also been celebrating that in some of his remarks. That was that very close race. Saw Labour still there, but with less than half of the votes that it won 4 years ago. And of course, we've got the Durham race, the acid test, as Nigel Farage is calling it, being declared probably as we go through the day or tomorrow. Do you think there's also that sense, we've talked so much about the Red Wall over the years, that the Red Wall is now getting a reform demolition threat?
So one of the interesting things that has been happening is that there is a phenomena that is reminiscent of the Red Wall. When you look at the voters that have gone towards the Reform UK party, it's those areas with lower, for instance, academic qualifications, with fewer graduate degrees, that are much, much more likely to vote for Reform UK. There's been a trend in British politics, which is the Red Wall crumbled for Boris Johnson, but then in protest to the Tories, voters switched back to Labour in 2024. But the question now is, will those voters who have proved themselves willing to change party now be prepared to change again in favour of Reform UK as a protest vote, endlessly switching party because the protest that they have isn't being heard?
I have a slightly different point about that. As you know, I stick up for my native Durham in all of this. Hang on, Durham County Council, that's not only left behind Britain. This is, I think, reform, and I think we'll see it also more generally as the picture evolves. Of course, you're absolutely right. There's that floating core of unhappiness and dissatisfaction moving around here towards reform away from Labour. But if you're talking Durham County Council, that's a university city, and it's also a city with quite prosperous parts and villages around it. So it's not only the hard scrabble parts of the northeast that we're seeing doing this. And that also, I think, goes for the Northumberland result and North Tyneside too.
And undoubtedly, there are going to be lots of bits that buck a trend, and we're at the foothills of trying to understand the meaning of the message that voters have sent over the last 24 hours. But I think it's the flexibility of voters, the willingness to change the party they support, has been a trend that we've really seen over 40 years. It's been accelerating, particularly over the last couple of general elections. It's a point that Keir Starmer's chief of staff and election supremo Morgan McSweeney knows and owns very, very well. But because of that, he will understand the signal, I think, that is being sent, which is there are lots of options for voters who might have historically supported the Labour Party. You've got, for instance, the support for Labour around the area of Scunthorpe appeared, I think it was close to historic lows. So if you remember, two or three Saturdays ago, the government effectively part nationalised the Scunthorpe steelworks in order to keep the blast furnaces working. If that was intended in any way to have a beneficial effect, it was not evidence in the numbers in the mayoralty race that was going on in that area. So I think there is a real question about what does Labour do in response to this threat, because there are about 170 seats in the general election where the gap by which the Conservative Party lost a seat was less than the amount of votes that Reform UK had, suggesting, and it's only a suggestion because you cannot say that Reform UK votes and Conservative votes are completely similar, but suggesting that amongst at least some of them, if the Reform UK threat hadn't been there on the right, then the Conservative Party would have won. Now the question is that going to be a phenomena on the left as well?
So that's a very good example of your cross-party quick arithmetic there. If you look at something like North Tyneside, that mayoralty there, where Labour won with 414 votes, but obviously a massive reform surge. So we heard Peter Kyle sort of putting on a brave face saying it was a good result for Labour. I'm interested in whether you think purely in communication terms that Labour have got the response right as they come to terms with this. But the Conservative vote combined with Reform there would have given a 10,000 majority. Our playbook did a bit of totting up on the hoof. So there's a great example of where you can see that pressure beginning to rise maybe on the right. Would it have been better, or could you see potential agreements or even coalition thinking there? And at the same time, you've got Labour trying to say, well, this is actually, it's great that we held on, but as you say, there must be a lot of soul searching. So yeah, how do you balance these two takes on one result?
Because you always have been able to measure election results by two different things. Labour is right to say a win's a win. And at time of speaking, I think it's right to say 3 of the 6 mayoral races the Labour Party has won. And of course, you've got one which is won by Reform UK. And they will say that we won and it shows that our party machine is working. But that does not mean that another thing isn't also true, which is the sheer percentages that Reform UK have been managing to achieve, if they can sustain that in Labour areas, pose an existential threat, because you don't always have to win to make an impact in British politics. Not only is there the example of how they whittled away the Tories' ability to win seats in last year's general election, but Nigel Farage has actually proved himself in the past to be able to have an impact on British politics without actually winning very much. And let me give you this example. Inside Downing Street now, just as they did a decade ago, they're going to be working out how they need to deal with this threat. And very often what happens is that policy starts to evolve. The tone and the language and even some of the decisions start to change. A decade ago, 11, 12 years ago, when UKIP started surging and was starting to win council elections, European elections as we had then, there was a response. And the response was a policy one. And that response ultimately was a Brexit referendum promised in the 2015 general election. Nigel Farage can change what other parties do by posing a threat that they know is a real and existential problem for them. And that's one of the most interesting things I think about this. It may not be that at the time of the next general election, Nigel Farage is on a pathway to becoming Prime Minister. I mean, it might be, but it might not be. But that doesn't mean that he won't have had a material impact, because other parties bending to the Reform UK agenda, well, we're already seeing it. We've seen it quite a lot for the first bit of this year. And I can only imagine that that trend is about to accelerate. So for all that we had Emma Reynolds in the Sky studio but a couple of hours ago, sort of saying nothing will change, we just need to deliver, I sort of have a hunch that isn't going to be what it feels like in a month's time.
And that phrase, nothing has changed. God, listeners will remember the great matter of Theresa May as everything fell down around her. So I think telling people nothing has changed is perhaps always a bit of a hostage to fortune. Let's turn to perhaps the thinking in the Tories as they wake up this morning. Nigel Farage, I thought, was very interesting in Runcorn. I don't know if this struck you as well. He really battered away any sort of idea that he needed to treat with the Conservatives at all. I mean, these sort of generic, who's he? And he said he was prepared to donate money to keep Kemi Badenoch in place. Now, of course, that's all good knockabout stuff, and fair enough. Also, if you've just won, you can enjoy your moment of triumph. We talked earlier in the week on the podcast. I'd been speaking to a very close ally of Kemi Badenoch. He was saying, no, she's absolutely secure in this saddle, and there's a lot of noise, but actually, yeah, do you think that she's any less secure in the saddle this morning as we speak?
Well, I think that one of the things that the election results suggest is that for all that it's a problem for her, I wonder whether it was actually also a problem for the argument being advanced by Robert Jenrick, because Robert Jenrick effectively was saying we can't have the two parties on the right competing for votes, cancelling each other out, and therefore allowing Labour to come up through the middle. But the lesson of this election, I think very clear signal sent by the electorate, is that Reform UK has the capacity to go into Labour areas as well as Tory ones. That's what we've just been talking about. But all of that means the ability to have, God knows, a non-aggression pact or some kind of informal arrangement that allows one party or the other to stand in a seat and put the resources in, or any of that, well, that has just become a lot harder. So proponents of the idea that Reform UK and the Tories can work together this side of an election now look like they've got a much, much harder job than they otherwise would have done. So from that point of view, I wonder whether it gives just a little bit of help to Kemi Badenoch. So one of the things that's going on in this set of council elections is that there are, I think it's 17 Tory councils up for grabs. And there is a chance that the Tories could lose all of them. But bluntly, we don't know because nothing has happened yet. We don't yet have any, I think, at time of speaking, council results actually in. So there isn't yet a sort of mood around the Tory election results. There isn't a sense of how badly the Tories have done. The Tories have the most to lose because they did really well in the last time that this cycle of council elections was up in 2021, post the vaccine bounce, Boris Johnson riding high. They were on 40%. In the polls, the Tories have halved their vote share to 20%. So we're expecting something pretty catastrophic, but we just don't know what it is yet. So it is a little bit early to pronounce a firm verdict on what's going on.
True enough, although there's a bit of a straw in the wind that my Labour colleagues were reporting from Staffordshire, that county council, which was nearly wholly only Tory until today, and they're voting got going, and county got going pretty fast, and Reform winning 24 of the 30 wards declared. Now, it's true there's still another 30 to be counted, but the trend there just, it's still looking reformy, isn't it? And predictions that one could go. So I think you're right. We won't see the full picture. I was rather intrigued that Keir Starmer is going to go out and about, but not sort of go to, literally is going to somewhere with no name on it, because he's going to a military facility, and that gives him a sort of, I think it's a sort of drone, somewhere that produces drones, and he will obviously want to talk about the big picture in Ukraine, etc. But it also means he didn't have to choose to go somewhere. So if you go somewhere where you just about hung on, you've got to account for that. You can't obviously go somewhere where someone else just won. And that does make me think that was a really interesting point you made, that not only will the messaging have to change a bit, but perhaps some of what is being said by Labour is going to have to be thought through again. So perhaps today for Keir Starmer doesn't want to be seen to disappear, but he doesn't want to have to go somewhere where the absolute pressure will be on him to say, all right, what's your plan here to see off reform?
In 1997, in 2001, 2005, it felt to me like elections were won on the centre ground. There was a competition over the mythical middle of the British electorate, often aided by supporters of one party or another staying away. And there was an arms race for a sort of moderate Britain. That changed in 2019 with Boris Johnson, where he united the right, and the left under Jeremy Corbyn was all split. And again in 2024, Keir Starmer united the left, and the right was all split. The question for Keir Starmer right now is, does he try and hold on to that left coalition that he managed to put together in the last election last year? It felt almost like there was an informal pact between the Lib Dems and the Greens, and as well as Labour fighting hard in different areas. Or does he try to go after reform voters and risk splintering the left and seeping votes away, and creating that sense that the left-leaning parties are fighting against each other, potentially advantaging the Tories and other parties on the right? There is a massive strategic decision to be made by Number 10. It's nuanced, it's complicated. It strikes me right now there are no easy answers, but it's going to be fascinating to watch.
And I think they will want to take a bit of time, sort of have a holding response and take some time. Conversely, I think you could flip your analysis really nicely and say that's the same thing presents itself in different colour, if you like, for the Tories. The closer Kemi Badenoch moves towards that reform rhetoric, we saw it on net zero and other things, you begin to say, well, hang on a minute, if you're going to have this one, why are you going to take this one? You could have the real thing. Is that, mischievous thought, the opportunity that Boris Johnson might be eyeing? You said it yourself, that this whole kind of template about the fight for the centre got smashed up by Brexit, and probably at the moment when Boris Johnson decided he was going to be the candidate of Brexit. We don't know his intentions as endless flirtations. Does he want to come back from one of his many, many holidays and really play a role in British life again? But you would have thought that this would be the moment when at least that decision will present itself. He probably has to make it, and his supporters, one way and the other. Is this the moment when, not in a direct challenge, when he makes himself, shall we say, ready to serve, as politicians tend to say, when they want to?
Whether it is the Conservative Party, whether it is the Labour Party, I predict we're going to hear more about immigration curbs. We're going to hear more about a slight change of tone around net zero and environmental policy. And we're going to be hearing more about things like boosting the military, all of which are ways of dealing with reform. Whether or not that proves to be the right strategic decision ultimately, well, we're just going to have to find out. But all of those are a consequence of the kinds of results that we've seen so far and that we got overnight.
Right, well, we'll leave it there with the results still rolling in. We've got some more commentary to do together, so stay with us across the day. And, it's fun doing a podcast this morning.
Thank you very much indeed, Anne, for being here. We will be back not on Monday because it's bank holiday, but on Tuesday. So have a very good weekend, and we'll tell you how it's all shaken down when we're back on Tuesday morning.
The first 100 days might be over, but President Trump is showing no signs of slowing down.
America will soon be greater than ever before.
So we're continuing to follow every twist and turn of this remarkable presidency.
And trying to make sense of what it all means for the US and for the rest of the world.
So join me, James Matthews.
Me, Malika Kellner.
And me, Mark Stone.
For Sky News Trump 100, wherever you get your podcasts.